right, look, I've been far too quiet for far too long on this one. You know, so quiet that I actually filmed a video on this when I originally saw it. And I was so pissed off in that video, I decided to scrap it because, it involves children. Look, we have kids. I was pretty heated when I did the video, so I never released it. But I think I'm at a point now. Where I could at least talk about it because this happened not far from me. This happened in Burlington. So I want to explain what's going on here. And at the end of the video, I'm going to give you my overall opinion, but let me bring you up to speed. I want to talk about this issue that really exploded into the public eye this year. And it's something that most people didn't even know existed until the controversy hit their doorstep. And it's the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, or YRBS for short. Now, this survey's been around since like the early 90s. I may have even taken it when I was a kid. I can't really remember. It's run by the CDC, and it's meant to track stuff like drug use, mental health, and some levels of sexual activity. Basically, some levels of behavior that might put teens at risk. And most of the time, this survey kind of flies under the radar, and it's not very controversial. Well, it is now. And I think the survey generally gets handed out every couple of years, and I believe it's normally to like high school level students. Sometimes I'm sure an iteration of this may go to middle school students as well. This goes across the country. But here's where things go sideways. So in 2025, a local version, again, local, of the YRBS, it got handed out in Burlington, Massachusetts. And it really, really triggered a absolute firestorm. Because this specific version, it asked middle school students, some as young as probably 10 and 11 years old, explicit questions about all different types of sex. And when I say all, I mean all, including but not limited to sexual orientation, gender identity, and even described these sex acts in somewhat graphic detail. It's ridiculous. Look, I'm not making this stuff up, guys. And here's the thing. The parents had an opportunity to opt their children out of this survey, but the district gave it to them anyway. Yes, the district gave it to them. You heard that right. So basically, students whose parents said no were still told by the faculty, staff, teachers, whatever it may be, to take said survey. I believe even some of the kids said in class, like, my parents didn't sign me up for this shit, right? Like, that's really what happened here. Yet, they still had to sit there and do it. Then what followed was this absolute tidal wave of outrage from the parents. The parents flooded school committee meetings, legal letters started flying around, and the Massachusetts Liberty Legal Center, they decided to step in and they filed a federal complaint saying that Burlington broke the law. Specifically, there is something called, and you can look this up too, it's called the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment. Basically what that does, it gives parents the right to keep their kids out of surveys like this one. That's what that does. Oh, and by the way, this wasn't a case of like one or two kids just slipping through the cracks here. This wasn't like a one-off scenario where one kid that opted out had to take it. Apparently, there were multiple opt-out requests that were pretty much ignored. But really, part of the issue here is that even kids who didn't take the survey, I mean, of course, they're going to be exposed to this content because obviously kids are kids. They're going to talk, right? They're going to talk. Furthermore, it could provide an opportunity to obviously look these items up on the internet, right? And try to figure out what the heck is going on. I mean, I know when I was 10 or 11 years old, like, I wasn't even in the realm of thinking about these things, right? It's unbelievable to me. And this thing just spread. That's what happened. So when you really look at this, it's not really just a policy failure, and I'll get more into this a little bit later. I'm a parent too, and I feel like my trust in the education system would be tarnished if this happened with my kids. Oh, and by the way, the officials of Burlington, they admitted that. They admitted that there was a problem here. Apparently, the superintendent acknowledged that the students were wrongly surveyed, and the school committee chair straight up said this should have not have gone out to the middle schoolers. Now, whether that was a mistake to send it to middle schoolers and it was supposed to go to the high schoolers, I'm not exactly sure. But the damage is already done. So I was also reading that the committee members compared the explicit nature of the questions to something, and this was a really good analogy, by the way, to something that if you were shown what these questions were as an adult at work, you may honestly qualify this as some levels of harassment, right? Which I agree with. That's how crazy these questions were. And the big concern here is if a child, like this is the big one that I was reading, if a child disclosed, let's say, some levels of sexual abuse on an anonymous survey, no one would know who they were to get them help. Because the survey was anonymous. It couldn't trigger the mandated reporting laws that exist to protect the kids itself. And all of this happened because a vendor specifically named John Snow Inc., and this vendor's out of Boston, I believe, they were given the reins to update and administer the survey. But the district didn't, at least, I mean, I don't think they did. Maybe they did. I don't know if they reviewed this thing, is what I'm trying to say. I don't know if they reviewed the content of this survey before sending it out. But some of the most graphic definitions allegedly had been added by this John Snow Inc., or we'll call it JSI for short, okay? And the school never told the parents exactly what was on it, right? So it's not even clear that teachers were given the script they were supposed to read. And it seems like Burlington had no real system in place to prevent this. And I don't believe they really vetted the content of these surveys. At least I hope that's the case, right? I actually hope that's the case. And they also didn't, they probably didn't even double check the opt-out list. So there's like multiple, like this is like dominoes, right? Like there's multiple things that happened that got to this point. And by the way, Lahey Health is even wrapped up into this because I think they did something with like an online portal, and they also help fund the survey as well. So now Burlington's wrapped up, this Jon Snow's wrapped up, and Lahey's wrapped up into this too. So I will tell you, I did a little bit more research. I'm like, is this only happening here? And there was similar cases. I don't know the exact content, but it was in Michigan and, of course, California. There were some similar surveys involved. The one in Michigan, the YRBS was handed out without proper notice. A student missed the opt-out form because he was absent or something like that happened. His mom never got a second chance to say no, and he ended up having to take the survey. In California, parents got upset because when 7th graders were asked about gender identity, it was a problem, right? And this even happened in Florida too. They ended up ditching the CDC survey entirely, made a version of their own, and one that skips, let's say, sexual orientation and instead asks kids about grit and resilience. I'm not exactly sure what they were trying to figure out there or what the, methodology behind collecting the data was, but there it is. So honestly, what we are seeing here is a national trend that parents pushing back on these schools, they of course they're going to push back on these sensitive areas, right? I mean, I feel like that's the common sense thing to do. And in today's political climate where trust in public institutions is already on thin ice, it really doesn't take much to set off a fire or even add fuel to that fire. So originally, like, I really went into this. The surveys were originally to help identify real problems. You figure like drug use, bullying, things like that, right? But the moment you break the trust with the families, when schools overwrite opt-outs or slip in content parents never saw, the good intentions really do end up getting lost in the controversy. But now in Burlington, the survey is on some level of a pause indefinitely, and the district cut ties with the survey provider with all the student surveys suspended until they create some levels of a new policy. But honestly, my main take on this is that there are multiple organizations involved, Right now you have the YRBS, you have Jon Snow Inc., you have Lahey, and then you have the chain of whatever happened in the Burlington school system, right? So there's like multiple parties involved here. But what really is most concerning to me is whoever signed off on this at Jon Snow Inc. in the first place to begin with. I'm not sure if this started with YRBS, then went to Jon Snow, then never got sent back to YRBS for review, or if it was necessary to do that. It's just outrageous. It's really outrageous to me. Look, even if I put myself on the other end of the spectrum, meaning if I was there and there was some meta-level methodology behind collecting this data, and it made absolute sense to collect said data for some, let's say, for some preventative future measure, okay? Maybe I'm not educated enough to understand this, okay? I'll just come out and admit it. But the reality here is that the probability that this survey went through multiple pipelines of multiple people from multiple organizations who thought it was okay doesn't make sense to me. You see what I'm saying here? You see where I'm going with? There's like multiple people that had all aligned on the same idea. You know, is this state so far gone and so radical? And it's gotten to the point that, you know, that a dozen adults from a hospital system, a public health agency, a local school committee could all see this survey, read those graphic questions, and still greenlight it for 10 and 11-year-olds? Really? Like, am I crazy here to think this? Honestly, am I the crazy one here? It's not just about what I'm trying to say. It's not just about the paperwork here or a paperwork mistake. This is like a culture level failure, I guess you could say. Because when you really boil it down, someone, or more likely a group of someone's, read those definitions, read those questions and different types of sex acts and said, yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense for a sixth grader to fill out. Really? Look, I'm a data guy too. You guys know this. But even if you believe, let's say, in some levels of data collection, and even if you are someone who sees the value in tracking, let's say, risky behavior to prevent, let's say, some levels of future harm, you still have to pause and ask yourself, how did nobody along this chain of approval say, hey, maybe we need to rethink this? You see what I'm saying here, right? Like, that's where my mind goes. That's my main issue with this. And that's where this whole entire thing breaks down. Because anyone, I think, with any levels of common sense would think it's ridiculous, right? So anyway, sorry for the rant there, but it just gets to the point where you think beyond. I like to think beyond just about what was filled out. And I feel sorry for the kids. Of course, I feel sorry for the parents. I try putting my side on both ends of the spectrum to try to like understand, right? To try to understand the methodology behind these things. And when, again, you boil it down, it's like this went through so many chains of command that how did all of these people think this was okay? That's what's most concerning to me. That all of these people are aligned that it was okay. I don't know. Maybe I'm the crazy one. I don't know what it is. But anyway, that's it for today's video, guys. I'm going to stay up to date on this one. And more importantly, actually, let me say this before I get off. If you live in a school district or a school system, a public, whatever it may be, and you are getting stuff like this, whether it's coming from the CDC or whatever, please let me know. Because I would like to cover that information because I find it very important, and not only important, but I also find it really putting parents in a position where they're probably second guessing sending their kids to these schools, right? So like we need to stop this before it happens in other areas. That's the moral of the story here. So anyway, guys, that's it for today's video. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.